Hello. Thanks so much for having me, for taking the time to talk. Yeah, so my beginnings in music, I started making music like on a whim in a really unpredictable manner. I was not on that path in life, and then I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about music that was on the radio. I was complaining, and he challenged me to write a song. Which I did, and that really like started me on this path of creativity, of songwriting. And I think for me, rock music, there's sort of a toughness and a sense of power that's really built into the genre. And for me, when I listen to music, like the feeling that I want to have is a feeling of empowerment and a feeling of strength. And that's something I was drawn to as a listener. And so when I began to really find my voice making music, that's what I wanted to do. And for me, guitar, bass, distortion, saturation, all of those things make me feel powerful. And that's why I love rock music. So yeah, my new record is called Mono, which is a nod to the hearing loss that I suffered last year, which came about totally randomly. And I woke up one morning, I was deaf in my right ear permanently, and really without any warning or any symptoms beforehand. So it was this major change overnight, and I think it has greatly informed the way I approach this record, because this happened, and all of a sudden there was this moment where I kind of had like an opt-out for music. People were like, well, if you want to become an author or do something different or whatever, maybe this is the time. And I think for me, having that moment where I could say, you know what, I don't have to do this, it brought about this like recommitment and reconnection with music. And so this record is my 5th studio record, which is crazy, but I think in a lot of ways it feels like a debut, in terms of the sense of urgency that I had, and just this like creative energy and almost like creative pressure that I had inside of myself. That's like, I have to get this out. I just had this really life-changing experience, and the only way I knew how to cope with that was to make music. So I would say that it impacted my sense of urgency as a songwriter and as a musician. And the other thing that the hearing loss did was it put me back in a beginner's mindset. I don't hear the same. My perception of the world is different. So I don't really have the same rights and wrongs, right? Like, this is how a song should sound. This is how the guitar tone should feel. I was on shaky ground, and I think it put me in that place of like, well, I'm not sure what's right, but this feels right. And I kind of followed that instinct and those feelings in my gut, and I think that led me to a really exciting place. So yeah, there's a song In America on this new record. I'm actually about to play it live for the first time tomorrow. We just rehearsed it today. I love that song. The genesis of that song was really me thinking about the complicated nature of being the citizen of a country, and how you're raised in many ways to have a sense of pride, and there are things you love about where you're from, right? We all love things about our hometown, but at the same time, I can zoom out and say, like, there's a lot of things that I disagree with, and a lot of things that are really concerning me as a young person living in America, and things that make me scared about the future. And so I think, like, for me, I'm I'm not a totally political musician in the sense that not all my songs are about that. I think a lot of my songs are about identity and emotionality, but like tied up in identity is your national identity, you know, and it's how you relate to your place of origin. And I think it's really important to speak about that, and to speak about that in what I hope in this song is a nuanced, complex way, instead of just like, you know, down with the system, burn everything to the ground, which like, you know, that's one response. But like, to me, it's about, well, this place is complicated, right? With freedom comes responsibility, and where do each of us land in that spectrum? And so I just think it's important for me to voice my thoughts on it. And, you know, especially as a queer woman living in America, I've got my unique perspective, and I think it's important to voice that and share that. So I have been nominated for 2 Grammy Awards. I mean, I feel very honored to have been recognized in that way. I also, at the same time, you know, there's so much music that comes out every year. There's so much beautiful, amazing music, and it's so hard to pick like, right, 5 rock songs and decide between those. So it almost feels like an impossible task to award people honors for music, just because there's so much great music that's out there. But, you know, it was a really big honor for me, and I think it was also just one of those moments that kind of like, I don't know, just sort of legitimized for me what I'm doing. Just another push, like, hey, you're doing something that's interesting and exciting to people. Keep going with that. And I think I try to think about like the good things that happen in my career, really just as like little pats on my butt. Like, okay, yeah, like keep going, don't stop. And instead of staying in like an egocentric, or certainly not a narcissistic place, but just viewing that as like, hey, this is encouragement to continue on the path, to keep going, to keep making music, keep pushing. And you know, the record that I had those nominations on, I worked really, really hard on that record. And a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into it. And I think, you know, this new record, Mono, that's coming out, I feel had a similar work ethic. And again, that word urgency keeps coming up for me, a similar urgency. Oh my gosh. So I think my message for anyone listening who is dealing with pain, change, grief, adversity, is just really to remember that time is magical. I think when we're stuck in these moments, or when we find ourselves in these moments of great pain, it is so hard to imagine the future. And when we do imagine a future, we often imagine it as the same as our present. But I think, you know, what I have found time and time again in my life, dealing with, you know, specifically now the hearing loss, but in the past, as you mentioned, the death of my biological father and his struggles with addiction, I've just come to understand that no matter where you are right now, there is a future, and it does look different. And like, we need you here for that future. So if you're listening and you're in one of those moments, just know, like, we need you. And also, things are going to change. And things are going to change in ways that you have no way of predicting. And that's actually the beauty of life, right? I think the other thing that I've thought a lot about recently is the importance and naturalness of pain in human life, right? So we often think, avoid pain. Pain is bad. You know, but I read a lot of Buddhist texts, and they make a lot of sense to me. And one of the fundamental teachings is that pain isn't inherently bad. It's just a part of life. What can be avoided is misery, and misery is what happens when we try to avoid pain, right? So if you're finding yourself in a painful experience, like, that's okay. What that means is you're alive, and that's a beautiful thing. Like, every human being experiences pain, and you know, we often look back on painful experiences and we can find a lot of beauty and a lot of wisdom. And I think it's just important to remember. And I really kept this in mind with the hearing loss, like all the pain and all the discomfort I was going through. I sort of kept repeating to myself, like, this isn't bad. This is uncomfortable, but it's not bad. And it will change. So I think those are my thoughts on that. In terms of bands that influence my music, oh my Lord, there are so many. You know, with regard to this most recent record, a lot of what I was listening to was, you know, alternative rock. Some of the big influences, just like what I was listening to when I was making this, were Metric, one of my all-time favorite bands, Yeah Yeah Yeahs, Missy Elliott. I went back and listened to so much of her catalog when I was working on this record, and just very inspired, not only like visually everything that she was doing, but just sort of the different cadences and different flows and how slow some of the songs are, which is really interesting, especially on her earlier records. Outkast is a huge influence for me as well. Nine Inch Nails, Muse. I was listening to so much Muse when making this last record. So those are some of the big bands and artists that have influenced me along the way. Oh, and I was also listening to quite a bit of Santigold, who I love. Absolutely, to everybody listening in Venezuela, gracias, thank you. I hope that I get a chance to play for you live soon. I appreciate you listening, and take care. Thank you so much.